we need God to bring us into his fellowship. We need to have him draw us. Never forget that going to God means not resisting God. Too many folks today try to strive to do it right, to be good enough, to be holy enough. And unfortunately, we will always fail. And our message today is entitled, What is Love? And to be honest with you, that seems like a foolish question, because I think at our age, most of us think we know what love looks like. But I will suggest to you that in the world that we live in, too often, what we see as love, what we understand as love, is anything but love. There's a sad truth that today many people are saying, if you love me, you will accept me even in my flawed state. And the truth of it is, we cannot, as Christians, accept someone failing and sinning and rebelling against God and not in love tell them that this is wrong, that this is not the way to God. It reminds me of a story of a little boy who was kind of roughhousing with his dog, and his mom said, you know, Bobby, I know you love the dog, but I think you love him too much. He says, what would you feel like if someone huge picked you up and squeezed the stuffings out of you, and so you couldn't even breathe? And the boy thought about it for a moment and says, I guess I'd feel like it was my birthday and Aunt Thelma was here. There's some truth to that. We do not always understand what love looks like, and we don't always practice love very well. And the scriptures that I'm going to preach on today are scriptures you have heard. I'm not going to exaggerate by much if I say thousands of times. If you've been in church for 50 years, I have no doubt you've heard sermons on this, 1 Corinthians 13, thousands of times. So why am I doing another one? Well, because to be honest with you, we aren't getting it. And the sad truth is, if I'm honest, I don't by nature love people. Now, if that hurt a little bit, let me tell you, it hurt me too. It does sting to admit that maybe I don't love as well as I think I do, or certainly as much as God intended for me to do. We're going to go down through this scripture, and I'm going to split it up because I don't want to just read the scripture and then try to go back and tell you after a whole chapter what each of those verses we're talking about. But we're going to start 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 13. And it says, if I speak in tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have all faith so as to move mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give it all away, all I have, and I deliver my body up to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Now, to tell you the truth, most of us, when we read that, want to probably put some caveats in there. We go, yeah, but, no, wait a minute, that doesn't, if I do this and this and this, that certainly shows my love, doesn't it? What Paul is saying is, too often, we measure love. There's a psychological term that I became very much aware because I was very much a part of it. It's called performance orientation. And performance orientation tells you this: you are good and I will love you if you do this, this, and this. Now, if you're honest, most of you have seen that in your life. Some of you have experienced it in your life. We come to a point where we realize that if I want to be loved, I have to hit certain levels. I have to do certain things. And what Paul is saying is that's not the way it works. I do not understand what love really is. And the honest truth is, no matter how good I am, no matter how great a person I am, if I don't have love, I am nothing. There are some fantastic people out there doing some amazing things, and we admire it and say, wow, isn't that impressive? But I'm here to tell you that what God tells me in the scriptures is, if I'm doing those great things and wonderful things without love, they're nothing. They amount to zilch. Too many people today are trying to cure the problems of this world without love. And sadly, the problems go on and they do not get resolved. I don't want to resemble the world in that. And to be honest with you, sadly, sometimes what we call love is actually destruction. We were talking before church about our welfare system. And we have a welfare system in this world today run by governments that says, what I will do is take away anything you have as far as self-respect. And I will tell you, don't get a job, because if you get a job, I'm going to take away your benefits. And by doing so, I steal a person's dignity and self-respect. I steal their ability to be productive members. And I force them into a servitude of what we call welfare. And I'm here to tell you, that is perhaps the most unloving thing we could do for those folks. Would it not be far superior to take those folks, teach them an occupation, help them in that occupation, give them assistance while they get on their feet, and let them become productive, good people on their own accord, and give them back their own dignity? What we consider as a loving thing of giving away money and forcing them into a welfare system that cannot be escaped is actually a very hateful thing, in my opinion. Now, there's people that are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. But I'm here to say, love does not always look what the world says it does. Sometimes what we do with, quote unquote, the term of love becomes a very unloving thing. And we have to, as Christians, be careful that we do not fall into that. So what does real love look like? Well, verse 4 kind of goes on and tells us a little bit. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love is patient, but I really don't want to love the people who try my patience. And you know, if you're honest, there's going to be a few of those people around you that are going to try your patience. In fact, I'm going to bet that we're sitting next to some of the same people that try our patience, because it happens that we all are folks who work on each other's nerves. And being patient is not something that we come by naturally. It's a God-given gift that He will develop in us. But I'm here to tell you, and if you don't believe me, go to any 2-year-old and wait for him to ask for something and don't get it to him quick enough, and you will learn that impatience is not a learned behavior. It's an instinctual behavior. We, by our nature, are impatient. We are, by our nature, not loving. And you know, the truth of it is, I am guilty of that as much as anybody else. I fail probably as much as any other human being. So what do I do about that? When I find myself being impatient, When I see myself envying things that perhaps I shouldn't, or boasting, or being arrogant, or being rude, and don't you all know that being rude is something that everyone else sees but you do not? I mean, let's face it, I've never met a rude person go, "Excuse me, I'm going to be rude now." It's always going to be, wasn't that person extremely rude? We all see it in somebody else. We don't want to see it in ourselves. And I'm here to tell you that there is a problem with that. I'm also here to tell you that there is another truth that I hate. And I mean, I truly hate this truth because it is true. But do you know that the folks that irritate you the most have the same personality traits that you have? The traits that make you just cringe and go, "What is wrong with that person?" is a trait you share. Now, I'm here to tell you, I hate that truth. And the reason I hate that truth is because it is true. If I'm honest, the next time someone irritates me and I sit there and go, "Yeah, they sure look a lot like me," that's not what I want to hear. That's not what I want to say. I want to say, no, I am nothing like that. And someone sitting next to me will go, "Think again, Rick. You are exactly like that." So when I'm irritated with other people, the truth is I'm irritated with myself. There's a flaw in my personality that needs to be addressed. And I'm here to tell you that what Paul is telling me in this chapter is that if you want to be less irritated with other people, practice love. It is a very interesting fact that the more you love, the more you try not to be irritated by those irritating people. And trust me, they are many. If you go out into the world today and can't find somebody that's irritating, you're not trying, because they're there. You don't have to look hard. Sometimes I just have to get up and look in the mirror, and I find an irritating person. So irritating people will come my way. But how I deal with them will determine just how irritating they are. I found a simple truth is that the more I love the people that irritate me, the less they irritate me. And ironically, and folks that have known me for some very long time will tell you that Rick seems to be less irritating than he used to be. And there's a reason for that. By developing love, by knowing that I am as guilty as they are, and acknowledging that, not only do they lessen their irritation of me, but that irritating part of me gets lessened also. Love has a healing effect not only on the other person, but on me. For me to love someone else is a healing thing for me. Don't ever forget, God developed love to cover a multitude of sins. And that's not for those folks. That's for these folks. You and me and I all do that. You know, when Paul says that love endures all things and hopes all things, what he's not saying is, or believes all things, he's not saying believe everything you hear. Because I'm here to tell you that if you believe everything you hear, somebody's going to sell you some swamp ground pretty quickly. There are bad, unscrupulous people out there that are telling you lies frequently. When Paul says to believe all things, what he's saying is believe all things that are good and positive. Love can and does conquer evil. It's not a maybe, it does. If I let it. If I'm willing to submit to love. Love will overcome all the lies, all the negativity, all the terrible things this world is going to throw at you. And trust me, it is going to throw a lot of negative to you. Love can conquer evil if I let it. Now that's an if. I don't have to. Honestly, I see people living without love, and being overwhelmed by evil every day because they refuse to love with a love that God designed. We do not have within us the ability to do godly love in our world. But we do have, as Christians, the ability to draw on God's love within us, to see what He has done for us, and then translate that to the others around us. It is hard with irritating people, but I'm here to tell you, if you use love, those irritating people will become less irritating. And that includes guys like Rick Bachman. Because I'm here to tell you, I can be as irritating as anybody out there. And if you don't believe me, ask my wife. She'll tell you. I do not have an ability to deal with irritating people on my own accord. I do have an ability to draw on God's love and therefore take on a different attribute. And by doing so, become less irritating myself. Moving down to verse 8, love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For all we know in part, we prophesy in part. And when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I've been known fully. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Now, that's pretty powerful stuff if you base it. What the Bible is saying, what Paul is trying to tell me, especially with the analogy of being a child, is that throughout most of my life, I reasoned like a child. People irritated me, and therefore I felt justified in being mad and irrational and irritating back. In fact, I could honestly say that at points of time in my life, when I dealt with really nasty people, I could almost brag that if you want to be nasty, I can be nastier. And the truth of it is, that is not a godly behavior. It's a man behavior. It's not a loving behavior. I had to learn that that was not only destructive to that person that I was being angry with, but it was also being destructive for me. When I look at the Bible, and when it tells me that love conquers all things, do I believe it? Too many people today are arguing that that Bible means nothing, that the truths that it speaks is not the truth. And I'm here to tell you, and I'll tell you 1,000 times, hopefully, before I die, that that Bible has fundamental truths that apply today in 2021 as much as they did 4,000 years ago. That truth is that God can change human beings. He can change you and me if we're letting Him. But we must let Him. Now, I will tell you that when we talk about love and we look at the world around us, you have a hard time figuring out what love looks like. If Hollywood would have any indication, love is really strange and very perverted. And I'll be honest with you, you don't have to watch too many films to see what Hollywood considers love. And I would suggest to you that you don't have to follow many of those actresses or actors and their personal lives to understand that if they had any insight to love, some of their marriages might last more than a couple weeks. They are probably the most to be pitied of all. Hollywood's view of love is not love. It's perverted. It is twisted. And it is designed to take you away from what God's love really looks like. And there's a reason for that. You see, Satan knows that the most fundamental, challenging verse in his world is John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. For Satan, that verse totally undoes everything he wants, everything he desires. And today, if you go out into the world, and if you go onto that fancy little computer and you get Google and you say, what is love? You're going to find some very scary stuff. Indeed, I find pedophiles now telling me that they should be accepted because what they are doing is really loving those children. Now, I find that abhorrent, and I find it without question wrong. But the world is questioning it because what they're saying is, we don't know what love looks like anymore. We have not seen what love looks like. And like I said, go to Hollywood and you're not going to see a good vision of what love is. You're going to see a twisted, perverted attitude. And it's going to be called things like love, but it is anything but. It is basically an affront to God and what love was supposed to be designed for. There's a story of a man and a woman celebrating their 25th anniversary, and they asked the husband to give a brief account of the benefits of his marriage over that long period. And they said, tell us what you've learned from all these years with your wonderful wife. And he said, well, I've learned that marriage is the best teacher of all. It teaches you loyalty, forbearance, meekness, self-restraints, forgiveness, and a great many other qualities you would not need if you had stayed single. I believe we are a little bit there. Like Tom, we have forgotten what love really means. And it's true what Tom said. You don't need the relationships skills. You don't need to understand those things if you stay single. But there's a problem. Our God designed us to be in relationship. Not only relationship with each other, which why people tell me, well, I don't need to go to church. Well, that's true, but you're missing something. There's a fellowship together that we share here today that they're not able to. There's a relationship that you develop with the folks that go to church with you. But there's also a relationship you develop with God. And if you're going to develop those relationships, it's going to require you to learn how to love. And I will tell you, it is not one of those things that you do naturally. I know some nice people. I really do. There are some really wonderful people in the world, and I can tell you that folks that will say, you have got to meet so-and-so. They are such a sweet person. They're just so nice. And when I talk to them and I say, what are your problems? What are your failings? Those sweet people suddenly tell me things that I'm like, oh my Lord, they're not the sweet, nice people that people think they are. That's because you and I are flawed, failed human beings. And even the nicest of us don't have all the answers, and we're not naturally good, loving people. I will tell you, and this may come as a shock to you, but you're not the easiest person to get along with. And neither am I. And it's a frustrating truth because it is true. I do irritate people. You irritate people. And people are going to irritate you. That is the nature of the world you live in. And like I said, I would love the fact that all those irritating people were 100% opposite of me, but they're not. They're just like me. And the things that irritate me with them are the things that most probably are irritating somebody else about me. So what do I do with that? Well, my advice is look no further than the Bible. The Bible gives me what real love looks like. I quoted John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son." Jesus came to this world, ministered to thousands, raised some from the dead, healed many, fed thousands, and to thank him, they killed him. Now, I would suggest that from a human perspective, you might argue that he failed. That he showed them love, and they failed to respond in kind. And I'm here to tell you that from a human perspective, God did fail. Now, that's shocking, I know. But the reality is, that's from man's perspective. From God's perspective, he loved us with a love so pure, so holy, so complete, that even the folks who hung him on the cross, he prayed, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." His love was so complete, so compelling, that he willingly died, not just for one or two people, but for every single soul on this earth, including the ones that he knew full well would reject him. Now, I'm here to tell you, I would not be comfortable dying for someone who hated me, putting myself in harm's way just because the person who hated me the most might be in a way. That's my human nature. God's love says, no, I will die for that person without hesitation. God's love is not a dysfunctional love. He is not a stalker, and he will not force his love on anyone. You are free to accept or reject his love, and he will always keep it that way. For it to be any other way would make God dysfunctional, just like you and I are. I am undeserving of God's love as much as you are undeserving of God's love. But from that perspective, I understand that he did love me enough that even though I was undeserving, even though I was his enemy, he died for me. He lived and died so that I might have life. I will tell you the truth. When it comes to loving other people, it's not always easy. And I'm here to tell you that it's not natural. You're not going to love people naturally. And it will be a situation where when you look at love from a world perspective, they will pervert it and say, you're free to love those people that you like and who do not irritate you, but you do not have to love them folk or them folk. And you know, it's always a funny thing when you go us and them, because suddenly we've divided ourselves into two groups. Us are the good ones, and them are the bad ones. When Jesus Christ came to this earth, him and the Father did not say, well, we're good people, and we're going to go down to them and save a few of them. Jesus Christ came to earth as a human being. He bled just like you and I bleed. He shared temptation. He shared pain. He shared all the things that you and I share so that he would not be a them, or we would not be a them to him. God loved us enough to become one of us. And I'm here to tell you that hatred which is, I believe, the opposite of love. And God is the author of love, and therefore, by default, Satan becomes the author of hatred. And I can tell you many, many people who tell me, I hate these people, or I hate that person, and I am justified in why I hate them. I can rationalize why I hate them. Here are the list of things that they are and they do, and that makes hating them okay. The problem with that is, if God is the author of love and Satan is the author of hate, and I am rationalizing my hatred, I don't have to be a scientist to explain to you whose side you're on. I don't have to take too long to tell you that if God tells you to love and Satan tells you to hate, and you continue to hate, who you're following. Hatred will divide us. Hatred will tear us down. It has kept people divided for centuries. And I'm here to tell you that Satan rejoices in every moment of hatred. Love, on the other hand, can and does heal the deepest of wounds. It leads to reconciliation, and it will take broken people and build them up. Love is a fundamental part of anything that is good on this earth. And as I said, the author of that love is God. If you want to be in a better place, if you want to live in a better world, reject the hatred and embrace the love. My last scripture for today is coming from 1 John 4, 7 through 12. And John knew a little bit about love. It says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for the love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world, so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but he loved us and sent his Son to be propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us." There's no question about what John is saying there. I am to love one another. And if I don't, if I hold hatred in my heart, he's also quite clear and states that we are not of God. Now, there are a lot of folks sitting in pews holding on to hatred that when they hear that verse, instantly shut the ears off, because it does not compute. It will not work with what they live. But I'm here to tell you, hatred is of Satan. And they will not go into heaven with hatred. Don't shoot the messenger, but the truth of it is, you cannot be a Christian and carry hatred with you. But I am got good news for you. If you're struggling with hatred, God can and will forgive you and help you in the healing. I can say that from a personal knowledge of a young man who was very much filled with hatred, who was very angry for much of his early life, who was rationalizing his anger and his hatred. And I mean to tell you, I could give you strong arguments of why I was justified in my hatred. And I probably could convince most of you that I was. The problem is, as much as I argued with God, I never won that argument. And what he told me was, your hatred will take you to hell. My love will take you to heaven. My friends, as we study that wonderful chapter called the love chapter, we need it now more than ever. We have a world that is more in need of love more taught by the world a perverted view of love than ever before. And I'm here to tell you, we need to re-examine what love is. And at its essence, God is love. And it is a condition He will allow us to share if we accept it. As a human, I'm incapable of coming anywhere close to being what love is. The harder I try, the less I'm going to succeed. In fact, the more I'm going to fail. I cannot love from my humanness. I will fail. Hatred will intercede, and I will become a bitter, angry, irritating person. And unfortunately, too many people in the world are battling that same battle. If you want God's love, the first step is to acknowledge that I'm not as loving as I could be. Take 1 Corinthians 13 and say, Lord, make me more like this. Make me more like you. Let your love shine in me and through me. And I'm here to tell you, if you pray a prayer like that, get ready, because God will honor it, and things will change. You will find more chances to deal with irritating people. It's kind of like praying for, there's an old joke that says never pray for patience, because if you do, you're going to get chances to try to learn patience. And that's true. And praying to be more loving is the same way. If you pray for God to help you to be more loving, trust me, you're going to find people that are not loving coming into your life and challenging you on that. And what that is an opportunity for you to practice God's love over your own feelings. The best that I can do is a miserable imitation and a perversion of what real love is. God is love. And if you want real, true love, you need to go to the source and find it. And trust me, when you do that, you're going to love it. Because God will take the anger, the irritation, the hatred out of your life, and He will make you into something totally different. And suddenly, some of those irritating folks will become a little less irritating, including pastors who tell you uncomfortable truths. Because unfortunately, we can be irritating too, and I know that for a fact. I've set as much time in the pews as I have on the pulpit. So I have yet to get to where I've had more time in the pulpit than I do in the pew. So I know what it feels like to sit out there and listen to someone tell me that what's wrong. And sometimes I get there and go, nah, you know what? Don't sit up there and judge me. And I'm here to tell you, if you feel judged today, it's not me. But if you're here and you're convicted, that's also not me. That's called the Holy Spirit, and He's speaking within you, hoping to change your heart, hoping to change your life, and make you more like Him. And that's all I have to share. Thank you.